All right, welcome everyone. We're back for our monthly first Wednesdays of each month. So we're doing this trauma healing and Ayurveda series, which really goes way beyond only the topic of trauma healing and really into how do we regulate our nervous system through these principles of Ayurveda, and how do we also support emotional healing in the ways that it really ties into physical health, vitality, energy, the clearing up of challenging or sometimes mysterious symptoms or chronic disease or disease processes. So this open community series is for that. It's for you if you are really someone who cares very deeply about their health and wanting to be of service to the world around them, and you want to create as much vitality and good energy in your being as possible so you can do your dharma and serve your family, community, and the world around you. And this is also a place for you if you consider yourself more on the sensitive side of the spectrum in your nervous system. Maybe you consider yourself an empath or a highly sensitive person who just experiences the world in a very acute way. And sometimes it's hard to feel like you're taking on the challenges and energetically of the world. And so part of our space here together is to reinforce the true deep connection inside of us, this connection to an infinite wellspring of energy that comes from way beyond our physical bodies. And so in these workshops, we do some practice together, and we start each session with some breath work and centering and a meditative poem passage. And then we'll go into the content topic for this month. So before getting into all of that, I want to kind of zoom out for a second so that you're all oriented to what our discussion and our topic today is about and how it kind of fits in to the bigger pieces of the puzzle. So this year, we started this workshop series almost a year ago, but this year, now in 2022, we're focusing on, I've kind of zoomed out our curriculum, so to speak, so that we're kind of each month, we're zooming in on a piece of this bigger picture puzzle that we're putting together around the trauma healing and Ayurveda. And so each month, so in February, we took December and January off. And then starting in February, we gave a big overview. So if this is your first time here, welcome. And if you want to go back and revisit any of the content between now and next first Wednesday of the month, a month from now, please go to my YouTube channel. It's just Alicia Lynn Diaz on YouTube, and you'll find all the recordings of previous sessions, including all the sessions we did last year as well. And last year we dove into a lot of the faculties of the Antakarana, which in Vedic concept, this is actually the mind that we call the mind in the West, but it's a much more detailed map of this energetic organ that we didn't know we had. So that's a really great episode from last year that kind of dives into all of that. So that was a lot of the foundations we laid this last year. But then starting in February, we gave a really practical map overview, and we said, okay, where's the intersection of this biological health, spiritual health, mental and emotional health? And in Ayurveda, these things cannot be pieced apart, but we have to talk about them in some separate ways, just to bring language to it, just to bring process to it, just to bring a practical application into our lives for that. So in February, we started giving that map and that overview. And we started looking at, okay, these are the three main areas. But even just under the biological health, as some of you may have read in the email that I sent out yesterday, and I've said this in previous workshops, biological health is not something that is just physical. People hear, oh, biological health, or this is a pillar of health. Mind, body, spirit, is a very cliche term that's very watered down and loosely thrown around and vastly misunderstood. So when we're not just talking about this simplified version, if we're actually talking about the physical health is not stagnant. It's not homeostasis. Stasis means something that's still, maybe imbalanced, but really in the physical body. Stasis means death, because there's no such thing as static. There's no such thing as static in nature. Every single day the sun's rising and setting. Every single moment your breath is going in and out. Every single season is constantly changing. The flowers are opening and closing. The energy is moving up the tree to the leaves and the fruits. And then in the winter, the energy is moving from the tree down into the roots and it's shedding its leaves. So even anything to do with stasis, stability, or quote unquote balance is actually an illusion. And it's something that most of us are seeking. We're seeking that as our health goal. I just want to feel balance. The truth is there's no such thing in nature. So rather, I'm inviting you to shift your perspective to this one of, instead of homeostasis as a health goal or as a overall vitality goal, it's a homeodynamic relationship with the ever fluctuating changes and the dance and the rhythms of life inside of us and life outside of us, which we are inseparable from. So that being said, this biological pillar of health is a dynamic movement of all physical processes in the body. And so in March and April, we broke down and dove in more deeply to each of those pieces. In March, we talked about circadian rhythms and the movement of energy out of us and the movement of energy in to us. And this circadian rhythm is microcosm, macrocosm of nature. With every in-breath, we're replenishing and rejuvenating, just like we sleep at night, just like we hibernate to some degree in the winter, right? And then with every exhale, we are giving, we are doing, we are producing, we are engaging, we are awake, alert, the sun is shining, the moon is full, and the full expression of summer brings harvest, right? So we broke down these cyclical rhythms and we started to explore, well, how do I dance with these rhythms and how do I catch the wave of health so that health naturally unfolds inside of me? And then in April, we broke down, so this biological pillar of health has 3 parts to it. And those 3 parts are the circadian rhythms, management of energy in and out, how we digest food and how we derive energy from food, and how the foods that we eat become our body. So last month in April, we discussed in more detail we listed like 8 to 10 things that destroy your digestive capacity, and then the 8 to 10 things to do instead, so you're optimizing your digestive capacity. So this was the pillar of digestion and creating the building blocks of health. So now this month, we're wrapping up those 3 pillars of the biological pillar. And today we're going to dive into the subtlest aspect of the biological health, which is managing our vital energies, the essence of our vital energies. And in yogic and Ayurvedic terms, this is the basis of prana. So how many of you are familiar with this term, prana? Sometimes people translate it as chi or life force energy. And prana is a vital substance, and it's a more subtle energy in the body that is connected through pathways, very, very intricate pathways called nadis in Sanskrit. They're called meridians in Chinese medicine. And the maps are very, very similar, but these tens of thousands of nadi channels are connecting your organs and creating an energetic transmission in the same way that blood brings oxygen to your tissues, such as think of your heart, blood bringing oxygen to the heart and that keeping your heart pumping. And if those channels constrict, what happens? Someone has a heart attack, a myocardial infarction, that little piece of tissue dies because it didn't get oxygen. Well, in the same way, these subtle energy channels that, by the way, you cannot see with the naked eye, and they are no longer there in a dead body. So when most of our Western physicians have gone through medical school and dissected cadavers to learn about biology, they actually were not, there was nothing observable about these nadi channels. So a lot of people trained through cadaver exploration, they don't even believe that it exists because they couldn't see it and measure it, right? But it's a more subtle science, and the pranic body is only there when the body is alive. And so beautiful traditional medicines like Ayurveda and traditional Chinese medicine have mapped out these subtle energy channels in the body, and they know very precisely which ones are connected. And for example, in acupuncture, where to put a precise needle along that meridian in various points on the body to stimulate and help dilate and open that channel. So prana starts flowing in an area that it was previously constricted. And so there are ways that I'm going to share with you today to support the health of your pranic body or your personal energy body to keep all of those nadi channels flowing. And when you really commit to doing these practices every day, you actually start doing self-acupuncture in a way, right? So if you're getting acupuncture, it helps maintain the benefits of that session. And in some ways, you wouldn't even need to get it because your pranic channels are so flowing and clear. So this subtle energy aspect of our biology, of our physical body, is vastly overlooked. And it's very, very important because it's the interface between all the parts, all the different parts of us. It's the interface between the most gross physical parts of us and the more subtle spiritual parts of us. And it's also the interface between our mind and emotions and our physical body. So the pranic body is the interface between your thoughts and emotions and how they relate to your physical body. So even if you have, say, a trauma or an unprocessed emotion, repressed memory, unprocessed experience, hurt from the past, it can only create ill health in the body if it is contracting and constricting the pranic field around the pranic aspect. So we can work to soften and loosen those stuck energies through the practices that I'll share with you today. And then this helps keep everything flowing really well. So to zoom back out to our map, this month's session is the third pillar under biological health. And then starting next month and the months thereafter, then we start going into the spiritual pillar of health. And then we start going into more nuance around the mental and emotional or psychological and emotional aspects of health and how to bring healing to the whole being in those ways, and also how to affect physical change. And one last note in this introduction that I'll share is that there's a reason I put these workshops in the order that I have for this year. And that is that any kind of trauma healing is, and kind of that transformational inner work that you do in your emotions or in therapies, that you're trying to change your relationship with, and regulate the nervous system, all of it is more effective when you follow the phases and steps that I'm laying out here in this community series. Meaning the digestion and the physical pillars and aligning with the rhythms of nature all create a sense of safety in the nervous system. And then doing the pranic exercises and things that we're going to talk about today, are the next phase of that. Once you have some physical stability, you're eating well, you're digesting a little bit better, your body can have, and your inner child has something that they can relax into, right? So it creates this foundation of stability. And then from there, we start working with the pranic body. So when the pranic body then becomes more clear and freed of any of those constrictions, then it has a solid foundation to build on. Now, a lot of times you'll find people in the trauma healing realm that are just doing pranic energy type of things. And you'll have this big experience, which is very sensational and it's good for profit and sales and all of that. And good testimonials because someone has some big experience. But then what happens? Just a few weeks later, they're right back to the same dysregulated, triggerable state from their trauma because they didn't lay the physical foundation. And so some of the physical foundation stuff can seem mundane, but there's a reason why I laid this structure. And I want you to understand why that was so deliberate and just what I've seen over the last 12 years of helping support people therapeutically, that it's great to have a big pranic movement, but without some of those physical foundations, or even many people go through talk therapy or other kinds of trauma healing therapeutics for many, many years and not really get the results, or their physical health still suffers. And that's because this foundation of biological pillar from an Ayurvedic standpoint, the Ayurveda foundations are missing. The relationship with nature is missing. The optimization of digestion and regulating the nervous system on a physical level is missing. And so this is our approach here. And now we can get into, thank you for your reflection, Paul. Yeah, it's a very common understood term, this word prana now, which is great. It's becoming a lot of more awareness. So let us get into the practices, our opening practices, and then we'll dive into some more of the teachings for today. So wherever you are, just come to a comfortable seat where your spine can be elongated and upright. And for the reasons that I just mentioned with the pranic body, I wanted to give you that introduction too, so that as you practice these breathwork practices that we do together in these classes, you can really understand the benefits of like what's really happening in my pranic body. And so I invite you during these pranayama practices, these movements of our prana, as we focus on different areas, that just start to sense and notice whatever you notice. Sometimes what you notice is going to be numbness or a lack of awareness in a certain aspect of your breath or in your body. And so notice that too. And sometimes it'll be heightened sensation, tingling, or any type of sensation. So just notice what you notice as we go through the practices, and let us begin. So in your comfortable seat, just align your spine, your shoulders are over your hips, and the crown of your head is lifting up towards the ceiling in an erect but relaxed way. And start to take 3 just deep flushing breaths. So you're inhaling as big of a breath as you can, and then open your mouth and just let it gush out. Sighing it out. 2 more. Big deep breath in and exhale it out. Good. 1 more big deep breath in as best as you can. Open mouth, exhale. Good. And just coming into a little stillness. And just noticing, where did the breath go as you were taking a big, full, deep breath in? Was it more your chest, your ribs, or your belly? And now start to increase the depth of your breathing by placing one hand on your belly and one hand up here on your chest. And go ahead and take a full deep breath in and see which part moves the most. Just notice which part's moving the most as you breathe deeply. Okay, 2 more breaths. And return your hands to your lap, and please just type in the chat to me which part was moving the most. Was it your chest or your belly? Just being totally honest in your assessment. When I take a deep breath, it goes more into my chest or more into my belly, just naturally, without you trying to think about it. So tell me which one it was. Jessie says chest. Blaine said belly. Anna, belly. Great. Just wanted to take a quick check-in with each of you. We'll talk more about it. Joseph said belly too. Okay, awesome. So yeah, thanks for your assessment and sharing. So now we're going to direct the energy down into the belly in 3 parts. We're going to breathe from the belly, then to the rib cage, then to the chest. And then we're going to exhale, reverse from top to bottom, chest, rib cage, belly. We're just going to do 3 of these together and really sipping breath in 3 distinct segments. And then we're going to do it smoothly. So go ahead and begin at the belly. So exhale all the air out first. Full deep breath into the belly. Inhale. Then the ribs. Then the chest. Exhale, chest, ribs, and then belly. Inhale, belly, ribs, chest. Exhale, chest, ribs, and belly. Inhale, belly, ribs, chest. Exhale, chest, ribs, belly. Now make it smooth. Inhale, belly, ribs, chest. Exhale, chest, ribs, belly. 2 more, nice and smooth. Full deep inhale. Also go at your own pace if I'm going too slow or fast for you. Inhale, belly, ribs, and chest. Exhale, chest, ribs, belly. Last one, inhale, belly, ribs, chest. Exhale, chest, ribs, and belly. Pause and notice. Good. The next practice is a humming breath, similar to Brahmari Pranayama, which is the bee humming breath, but we're not going to close off our ears. We're just going to do the long, slow humming sound, which is appropriate for everyone at all times. So take a full deep breath in all 3 parts like you just did, except on the exhale, you're going to exhale with a humming sound, lips closed, teeth apart, tongue presses to the roof of your mouth. 3 long humming exhales. Go ahead and begin. Mm. Mm. Pause and notice. And the final practice today is a mantra breath that's similar to Udgit Pranayama, but again, as done as an intro, which is appropriate for everyone at all times. And it's repeating the 3 syllables, ha, re, and om. And we'll chant that on the exhale 3 times. So full deep breath in all 3 parts. Inhaling. Exhale, Hari Om. Hari Hari Om. Hari Om. Pause and notice. Wherever your heart journeys, on whatever expedition in your outer life and secret inner realms, breathe in intimacy with infinity. Where can you go to avoid the one in whom all exists? Reach down into your deepest being. Take a stand in an eternity. Walk through this world. See every situation as an expansion of the mystery. Savor the tremble of recognition. The God in you is touching the God out there. Yatra yatra manoyati bhaya bhabhyantare piva tatra tatra shiva vashta vyapakatvat kava yashyati. Om. Thank you for your participation. So these practices segue us directly into this conversation around our pranic body, our subtle energy body, our vital energy body. And the practices we just went through are vital, essential foundations of introducing us in ways to start to promote the healthy circulation of prana in our body. And so there are kind of 4 main areas of practical self-assessment and application that I want to share with you today as your kind of things to take away from this session in terms of relating to the pranic body. And the first one starts with the way you breathe. And so imagine you're watering your garden with your garden hose, and you're pulling the hose through the garden. It gets caught on something, right? So it creates this kink. What happens to the water? It either shuts off completely or it starts trickling out. And so that kink in the garden hose metaphor is similar in what happens to your pranic body in these tens of thousands of nadi channels that are moving. And the pranic body, which is part of your sukshma sharira, which means your subtle body. The subtle body from a Vedic standpoint is that part of our being that travels. It's actually the part that reincarnates or travels from birth to birth, from body to body. And it creates these, it has these memories stored and these imprints stored in it. And so when juxtaposed on top of a new physical body, it creates that same memory or translation to the tissues. And so in the same way, if we're trying to water our garden to make sure that the garden is well fed, the kink in the garden hose doesn't allow enough water. Maybe it allows just barely enough just to keep the plant alive, but it definitely won't thrive. Or maybe that plant won't grow strong enough because it's just trying to struggle to stay alive. So it will never bear flowers or fruits for your harvest. And so kind of in the same way, we can tend to go through life just kind of getting by in these bodies, but not actually thriving in vitality. And so accessing the pranic body and the pranic channels is one way to support that. But there's also a little bit of resistance to doing it, because if there's an area of your body that the prana has been contracted or constricted, or it's basically been uninhabited by this life energy for a long time, it's causing you pain, it's causing stagnation, it's causing you ill health or some subpar human experience because of its challenges for whatever reason. Well, then there can be fear. As much as we, simultaneously want to experience greater health and vitality, we also are afraid of what it's going to feel like to have a life in that area. So to those of you who have conscious or unconscious hesitation to inhabiting your own body through your pranic life energy, I want to share more about it to invite you into creating a safer relationship, because it's with your body and with that mysterious place. And the reason I bring this up is because, especially in trauma, like if there was a traumatic event that happened in your past, even a trauma that was like very physical in nature, say like a sports injury, kind of trauma, and that leaves, your knee or something a little bit more susceptible, where most of the time it's feeling okay, but if you do one type of movement for too long or that type of thing, it just like it's a little bit more sensitive and susceptible. And then also to the emotional spectrum, it's like, especially I work with a lot of women who've experienced sexual trauma or from childhood or just in their past, in a more adulthood. But that particular type of trauma, it stores a lot, like in our wombs as women. Most likely you or someone has experienced some kind of violation in that way. And that's a type of energetic trauma that the pranic channels will constrict around. And it will be scary to re-inhabit energetically a space of the body that was previously hurt, because part of that tension is also protection. It's also guarding. And so it feels unsafe to let that guard down, so to speak. But there's also, and I'll give one more example. So if any of you have ever done like a yin yoga class, or really any kind of yoga class, across the board, whether you're identified as in a male or female body, the hips are one area of the body that tend to store emotion. And so when you do a lot of hip opening exercises, the fascia around the hips and the energy in the hips, when you start to really stretch and start to move prana into those areas that have been tight and stagnant for a long time, people will all of a sudden sometimes just start crying on their yoga mat. And they're like, I don't know why, but I was just in this, pigeon pose, and I just had tears coming out of my eyes and I didn't know why. And sometimes it's because there's something energetic being reprocessed. And sometimes it's simply also from the relief of having prana flood into an area that was previously dried up or uninhabited. And so in this way, I want to reassure, if there's some part of you that has hesitancy to doing pranic work or pranic practices, because of these reasons. And again, it's usually an irrational fear that most of us would not label as a fear. Most of us would say, oh, I just don't have time for that. Right? Or like, I start the practices, maybe you take away from this workshop and you say, every day I'm going to do those breath practices that we did with Alicia, and I'm going to do them each morning, and I'm very committed. But then what happens a couple weeks in, once the prana is like really just about to inhabit the area that it's been, it has had a dry spell from it, or that's been guarded for a while, all of a sudden you get distracted. All of a sudden you get too busy. All of a sudden work picks up. All of a sudden there's a family, something urgent happening that takes your attention away. And it's like, it's not my fault. It's just life. I just couldn't commit to that practice. Sometimes these things happen just at the right time to prevent us from like actually getting the relief from the thing that we are wanting relief from the health or vitality that we're kind of afraid to have unconsciously, right? But I want to reassure you that on the other side of just your pure presence and being with that part of you, whether it's numb, whether you're disconnected from it, whether you're, starting to feel sensations that you've never felt before that might be scary just because it's mysterious, just know that sometimes when prana has been deprived from an area for a long period of time, like the pendulum swings from one side to the other, and now you'll have a bunch of emotion or sensation in a particular area. But on the other side of that, it balances out. Just like if your garden's super bone dry, you forgot to water it for a day or two, and all the plants are wilting, and then oh my gosh, I got to water it. And then you give it a bunch of water And then what happens? There's a big puddle and it just like, it's sopping wet and it still looks like this. And you're like, oh no, did I kill the garden? And then all of a sudden you check back in on it and it had absorbed that and it's like coming back to life. So there's kind of this pendulum swing that can happen. So if ever you catch yourself in hesitation, in reservation, and in distraction or using excuses, because excuses make it easier to justify too. Well, I couldn't because of this very important thing. Well, it's like, what if we just didn't do any of that and we just accepted that I just need to do this at a slower pace? That's okay. You don't have to commit to doing something every single day. You can do it every other day. You can do it for a couple days and be like, I don't need to create an emergency to stop doing it or be distracted. I just don't have to move prana that fast. I can do it slower, and that's okay. So instead of judging ourselves for something sabotaging my success and my actions, like instead of making all that meaning or reaching for things that are, again, more an extension of the protection mechanism, just be like, it's okay. I'm allowed to do this slower over a longer period of time, because it can bring all those things up. So this is just a very important piece. And the most important thing is that you just keep showing up consistently over a long period of time. Stop jumping from thing to thing and trying to get quick results, immediate results. Stop thinking I did this thing for 6 weeks and I immersed myself in this pranic energy 6-week course and all of my problems were supposed to be fixed and it didn't happen. So I can't keep up with it, right? Like that's not how nature works. Nature doesn't work. Nature works in seasons. Nature doesn't work in sprints. And in the same way, trauma healing, nervous system regulation, and vibrant, vital life force energy and good health doesn't happen in 2 weekend workshops or in a sprint. It happens stable, consistent, over a long period of time with patience. Yes, some accountability helps. Having an environment of support, of supportive people and supportive situations is massively important to you being able to maintain a ritual for health, 100%. You don't want to be fighting fires all the time or trying to use your willpower over your environment. Absolutely. And there's a whole science to that, habit reformation and change. But in this context of trauma healing, especially around the topic of prana and starting to move prana into different areas of the body that may be constricted or guarded, this is a very important thing for you to understand. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Does that make sense? Your smiles tell it all. Okay, so yeah, bottom line, just do these things every day for as long as you can, and don't push yourself outside of your window of tolerance. Be mindful of your window of tolerance and be gentle with your unique window of tolerance. Okay, so the 4 things, the 4 things in terms of our energy to optimize our prana and our energy. First one is the way that you breathe. So we did some breath practices just now. And the first thing we did was I gave you a little self-assessment. Are you breathing in your chest or in your belly? Usually, if we bring our awareness to it, and we've ever heard anything about pranayama or, deep breathing, we're like, oh, got to breathe in the belly, right? And then some of you are breathing in the chest and you're aware of that. But how do you breathe throughout the day? How do you breathe when you're talking to your spouse, your partner? How do you breathe when you're doing your work? How do you breathe when you're at the computer? How do you breathe when you're doing dishes, walking from room to room in your house? How do you breathe when you're exercising? How do you breathe when you're driving your vehicle? How do you breathe when you're mindful and when you're not mindful? So this is the how you breathe is a huge part. Are you breathing shallow? Are you breathing in your belly? Are you breathing slow? Are you breathing mindfully? So the first assessment, when we just checked in, okay, when I take a deep breath, where does it go first? If I'm paying attention. And so if it's going up into your chest, this is, and when you take a deep breath, if it puffs up your chest, kind of like a Superman position, right? Like puff up the chest and suck in the belly. This is like very common in our modern media of fake models and all of that. It's like, gotta pull in my gut and puff up my chest. So a lot of times when we try to breathe, we do that. But this is a reverse, called a reverse breather. So if you're breathing into your chest, this is where the smallest amount of your oxygen exchange is happening in the lobes of the lungs. The majority of the oxygen exchange happens in the bottom third of your lungs, which is why belly breathing is very, very helpful. Simultaneously, belly breathing stretches these stretch receptors in your diaphragm, and those stimulate the vagus nerve, which we know brings about a sympathetic response. So it's very calming. But it's also how prana really floods into your body is through the lower belly. So if you're currently a chest breather and you want to train yourself to become more of a belly breather, this can revolutionize everything in your life and in your health just by simply making this one shift. And so I would recommend laying on the floor with your knees bent, feet flat on the floor. And I've called this with certain clients the washcloth method. And one woman, it like completely healed all of her health problems just by doing this washcloth method, because she was a reverse breather. And so you fold up a little washcloth into 4 little pieces and you put it on top of your belly button. And then you're laying on the floor with your knees bent. And as you breathe in, you push the washcloth up to the ceiling. And as you breathe out and exhale, you bring the washcloth down towards the floor. And this is how you train your belly without the postural muscles engaged. So you're laying. This is how you train your body to be able to breathe into the belly. So the washcloth moves up to the ceiling as you breathe in, meaning your navel expands out, and then it moves down to the floor as you exhale. So this is the remedy for a reverse breather. So start doing that on the floor, doing it 5 or 10 minutes or 5 or 10 minutes a day is plenty. And then start to transition to being able to do that seated. And then you'll be able to expand, not just into the belly, but into the sides and into your low back. And then everything will expand and then everything will contract to the center. So then every morning you do some of these breath practices. Do the ones that we did today. You can even keep this recording on YouTube, saved in your YouTube channel, and you can revisit it anytime you want and just fast forward to the part where we do the breathing practices and then go through it with everybody with a guided practice. Or you can just do it extended, set a timer on your phone for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and just do it. But you do them every morning, ideally on an empty stomach, as early in the morning as you can, soon after waking as you can, before you reflexively grab your phone, look at your email, look at some media device. You do these breathing practices, all the ones that we just did. Belly breathing, 3-part breathing, humming breath, Hari Om chant. And then the idea is that I don't just go back to breathing whatever unconscious way for the rest of the day. I try to engage one of these things in my daily life as often as possible. So in the morning, you can set an intention or a personal sankalpa, it's called in Sanskrit, your personal intention to fulfill. And in that, you're going to do the belly breathing or whichever practice. One other one that works great that I didn't guide you through today, which is called Ujjayi pranayama. I also like to call it the ocean breath. because it sounds like ocean waves moving in and out. So you kind of constrict the back of your throat as if you're fogging a mirror. But instead of your lips being open, your lips are closed, and you're just making that foggy sound on the in-breath and the out-breath. So it makes the sound that sounds like a slow ocean waves moving in and out. And that's really great because only you can hear it. No one can see or hear that you're doing anything different. And the constriction of the throat allows you to make a really long breath in and out. And so one of the earliest, so then you say that ocean breath. Okay, I'll do it in the morning just to establish it. And basically you can use that ocean breath with the 3-part breath. Nice, long, slow, deep breath, but you're just using a little bit of that constrictive sound, and it's very peaceful and meditative. And then you say, my sankalpa is every time I do XYZ today, like some activity that you always do, I'm going to do that breath. So something like if you have a lot of little commuting to do, like you have to drive the kids to school and pick them up and bring them to this practice and that practice. Well, every time I'm doing that, I'm going to do the breath practice. You know, even if you're talking to someone in the car, you can still be every breath in between talking, you can still be doing the breath. Or if you're commuting by yourself to and from work, it's a great time to commit to doing the practice because you can do it with your eyes wide open. It's still meditative without being so meditative that you're not alert into your environment. Or one thing I used to do is when I was in school, I would study and I would say, every time I read my textbook, I'm going to do the ocean breath. And so I would sit there and I was so alert. I was absorbing the information. I was doing the ocean breath and I was reading, and I felt like I was reading quickly and slowly at the same time. Like I was getting through materials so fast, but I was so present that the information was just like absorbing. It was amazing. And so you can use a sankalpa in that way. Every time I'm sitting at the computer, I'm going to have a good posture and I'm going to do the ocean breath constantly, no matter what I'm doing with all my emails, with all my admin work, whatever it is. I'm going to be breathing slowly, deeply, mindfully. So this is one of the ways that we start to transition, promoting the circulation of prana through our daily habits, through our daily life. And then you can also use this practice, like if you go out for walks, you know, instead of constricting the throat, you just do the deep 3-part breathing. And instead of like exercising where you're, you know, disconnected from your body, you're counting steps. So you're inhaling 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 steps. And then you're exhaling 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 steps. And then I'm inhaling 1. So you can count steps and associate your breath to it. And there's actually a science, there's a whole book about it that written by one of my dear colleagues, Dr. John Douillard, called Mind Body Sport. Is it Mind Body or Body Mind Sport? Mind Body Sport or Body Mind Sport. And he shares all the exercise physiology behind breathing and how to breathe. How he used to train Olympic athletes how to breathe and do everything sprinting, and they're breathing through their nose because of the effect that nose breathing versus mouth breathing has on your physiology, on your pranic body. It creates so much more calm. And so when you're exercising, you know, and so basically his whole program is you start just by counting steps and walking and only breathing through your nose and trying to get your steps as many steps into a natural breath that you can maintain without mouth breathing. But anytime you need to mouth breathe, you must open your mouth and breathe, or it creates problems. So, but you find a pace that you're able to sustain, and then you build your fitness from there through nose breathing. So that's the second point on the way you breathe has to do with reverse breathing through the belly, through the chest, in that way. And then also through the nose or through the mouth. So if you catch yourself throughout the day, shallow breathing through your mouth, this is going to instantly constrict prana in all the different areas of your body and put you into a sympathetic response without knowing it. You'll have a subtle tension and a subtle constriction because the prana is not flooding through your whole body. It's not getting to all the places it needs to go because it's rapid and shallow. So these are just some things. So you affect prana through the way that you breathe. And then you can start to condition the way that you breathe, expand the way that you breathe. So your breathing becomes more natural throughout your daily activities and daily life. Let me just check and see if there are any questions. So Anna says this is so hard when swimming. So absolutely. So swimming is actually a very wonderful meditative, mindful exercise for breathing, but it's okay in swimming to breathe through your mouth. But you want to train yourself to swim so that you're going for as long of your strokes as possible, as many as you can before needing to turn your head out and breathe. And if you practice pranayama practices that, like in the morning, if you do actually more vigorous pranayama practices that are outside of the scope of these workshops, but I have a program that I take people through to learn when to use certain practices, when not to use certain practices, which practices are appropriate for. But you go through these practices and they actually expand your fitness levels just through the breath channels. And then when you hit the pool, for example, it becomes a lot easier. So you're not wasting prana. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions that you guys have on any of these topics, just type them in the chat and then I'll check them periodically. Okay, second area is the way you move. So we said the way you breathe affects the pranic channels, but also the way you move throughout your day can be either a disconnected movement or a movement that wastes prana, or a very connected movement. And so the practice of yoga asana is one of the best practices to start to connect to mindful movement. But yoga asana, the way that it's taught in most physical yoga, is taught merely as physical stretches, which are wonderful and great for the posture and to keep your digestion flowing well, to keep you connected to your body, to keep everything limber. And yoga was originally designed so that one could sit in meditation comfortably longer so that they could reach enlightenment or union with God, union with the divine. And, in our Western world, it's been stripped away of most of those original things, original essence, in the same way that Ayurveda has actually been stripped of a lot of its original essence, where the purpose of Ayurveda is to have an optimized physical body functioning also so that you could realize your true divine nature that is not this body, but that resides in this localized experience of this body. And so how do you take care of the body in such a way that you can also have this God realization, self-realization? Those are all topics for another day, or for the spiritual pillars of health. So, which we'll actually be talking about next month. This is May. So our June workshop should go more into the spiritual pillars of health and how to bring more of that into the foundation of your health, healing, life, and also how it relates to healing trauma and regulating the nervous system. So basic gentle yoga classes especially are really great. Even restorative or yin yoga classes. So restorative and yin are very different. Yin is quite intense, deep myofascial releases that help flood prana into certain areas. And then restorative is more passive with props where you lay in different positions, but you can still use your breath and awareness. Ideally, you do use your breath and awareness to, when you're in a particular pose, to do a scan and notice where the areas of your body that you can consciously feel and the areas of the body that you cannot feel or sense. And this is how you start. Then with your breath, you direct your prana, because your prana goes where your attention goes. Your prana goes where your attention goes. So if your attention is constantly distracted or spiraling into, all kinds of anxiousness or worries, then all your prana in your body follows suit. And so in practices such as mindfulness, movement, yoga, you can actually start to direct your prana into areas of your body that have just been neglected, because for the most part, we operate as human beings like a head dragging a body around. Like we've got all our ambitions and agendas and worries and survivals and like things we got to do. And we're just like this big mental brain just dragging our body along for the ride. And in practices such as yoga asana, and then ideally even for even more energetic pranic sensitivity, Tai Chi or Qigong, which really works with the energetic planes. And you can bring your attention and awareness to these different places and start to feel how prana really circulates and moves, and how to support its movements into different areas of your body. I have one of my dear friends and colleagues who's a Chinese medicine doctor, acupuncturist, and he is also Qigong teacher, and he teaches medical Qigong. He taught medical Qigong for many years, and medical Qigong is specific to the physical movements, but the energetic pranic or Qi movements, and how different movements affect the specific organ system. So he would do a whole series, Qigong series, just to stimulate the energy of the gallbladder in someone whose gallbladder is stagnant, right? So he could use acupuncture along the gallbladder meridians, and or he could teach them the Qigong sequence for moving gallbladder Qi and get that organ working again. So there's a very real pranic science, and it can start very simply with you doing mindful movement in a slow, mindful, gentle way, where you're starting to breathe and bring your focus to different areas that feel tight or stagnant. And then you just hold that place again within your window of tolerance. Like your window of tolerance, you have an emotional and an energetic window of tolerance, just like you have a physical window of tolerance. Say, for example, you're doing a hamstring stretch. There's only so far you can go reaching towards touching your toes. That's within your window of tolerance. And so you always want to play with the edge. You want to dance with the edge of that window so that you're encouraging change, you're encouraging lengthening, you're getting a stretch, but that you're not pushing it so hard that you're tearing a muscle, right? So in the same way, you'll find that as you start working in the subtle energetic realms, that there's a window of tolerance for how much focus you can give an area of your body at a particular time, or how much time and energy you can contribute to doing the practices, or at what point that directing your prana there feels like it's life-giving, and then at what point does it maybe bring up some old stuff, old emotion or whatever. And so you allow it to bring up a little bit of it, but maybe not all of it, because you're dancing with that edge of your window of tolerance. Does that make sense? Yeah. So the way you breathe and the way you move both dramatically affect your prana, your pranic bodies, and the circulation of prana in your body. So from these two categories, we want to start exploring what are the practices you can do each day to start to establish good pranic association, and how can you translate those? What's your intention, your sankalpa, to translating those into your everyday existence? So where are you going to bring your mindful breathing, pranic breathing into reading, writing, doing, moving? And then the way you move, how can I also establish very deliberate, these are questions to ask yourself, how can you also establish spaces where I can move freely and start to inhabit my body in the areas that I feel disconnected from? And if you don't know what those areas are, just do a body scan right now. You just literally go from head to toe, starting with your head. I feel my scalp. I sense my ear, my right ear. I sense my left ear. I sense my right nostril, my left nostril, my right eye, my left eye, my right cheek, my left cheek, my top lip, my bottom lip, my chin, my throat, the back of my neck, the top of my right shoulder, the top of my left shoulder, the round part of my right shoulder, right? Like you literally, in detail, you can go through every little nuanced place in your body and notice each part. And you, during that scan, that body scan, you start to notice, oh, I feel more energy in my right hand than I do my left hand, or my right whole arm than I do my left arm. And you just notice it. You don't judge it. You don't make it right or wrong, good or bad. You just notice it. And as you do that throughout the day, you might notice, oh, I'm breathing more fully through my left nostril than my right nostril. And that's actually telling us something, because prana changes from the left side of our body to the right side of our body. Every 90 minutes, we go from solar to lunar, lunar to solar, solar to lunar, lunar to solar. Energy, every 90 minutes, there's this new cycle where you actually will feel yourself breathing more clearly out of one side than the other. And you'll have a heightened experience of prana more on one side or the other. And when you're solar, that's when you have more energy to go do and follow that rhythm and flow of movement, exercise, doing. When you're more lunar, you're going to feel more internal, self-reflected, quiet, maybe even like resting, napping. So these are all some of the ways that prana moves. But for now, just noticing what you notice without judgment. And then starting to inhabit, these areas. So then bringing your attention, because prana goes where your attention goes. Prana flows where your attention flows. If you're having pain in any area of your body, you can also just bring your attention there. Most people, when they have pain, they want to avoid feeling that place. So they eject in their awareness away from that spot. But instead, what if you could just observe the sensations of that acute pain or whatever pain, and just watch how it moves, watch how it throbs, watch how it increases waves of intensity and then decreases waves of intensity. So in this practice of connecting with our prana on a subtle level, we just start to become the witness, become the observer of prana, and start to notice how it moves. And then we engage with practices that enhance our sensitivity and bring more pranic flow, such as breath work and yoga asana, tai chi, qigong, things like that, or just body scans and breathing. And then we try to translate that into our everyday movements. Okay, so here's the two main things. Those were the two main things I wanted to share with you today. But now I did share in the email, there's two other things you might not expect. Two other practices you might not expect. And now we get into more subtle energy practices. But the first one of the two, this is a self-assessment of where you waste your prana. So this is what you need to ask yourself. Where do I waste my prana? Where am I wasting my prana each day? Prana gets wasted through excessive, unnecessary talking, small talk, mundane talk, over talking, overthinking, thinking, worrying, wishing for, wanting, complaining. Prana gets wasted. Prana gets wasted. I wouldn't even say it's all wasted, but prana gets expended through speech and movement and through the engagement of your five senses. So everything you look at, everything you taste, everything you touch, everything you smell, everything you hear is affecting your prana. And so where is it? Where are the things that I'm engaging my senses with, nourishing my prana, giving me prana, feeding my life force? And where are they draining and being wasted? So you, in your self-reflection after our session today, I want you all to write down a list. What are the things that nourish my prana? How am I gathering prana? And I'm also going to leave you with some more practices to gather prana. I already shared with you the main two, the breath work. That actually helps you gather prana. It reinforces your prana. It gets prana circulating and flowing. And then the movement, mindful movement. But what are the other ways that you spend your time where you feel filled up, where your energy gets filled up? I'll give you a hint. A big part of it has to do with nature. Spending time in nature, feet on the grass, earthing, gardening, walking in nature, laying in a grassy field in the sun or the warm shade, the comfortable breeze. These are all gathering prana. But what else? Playing music or listening to beautiful music. This helps you gather prana. The right use of the senses. So your senses can be overused or underused or just totally misused. And this affects your prana and your energy. So what are the ways that I gather prana? What are the ways that increase my energy and have me feel more connected to my body, my heart, my soul? We're kind of bridging into, this isn't purely prana, but this helps us understand and start to delineate where I'm wasting prana. Because then the other side of the column is, where am I wasting prana? What are the things that you're doing that you despise? And some of those things are duties that are necessary, such as service to your family or whatever. And then some of those things are just excessive, that you said yes when you meant to say no. And therefore you waste prana, and you'll waste a lot of it because you said yes when you meant to say no. So where am I people pleasing? Where am I overextending myself? Where am I being unrealistic with my time, energy, expenditure? This is how you're wasting prana. We have in our home, for example, I live in a small community home with my beloved and our brother and his child. And sometimes we have other people living on the property with us. We have 3-acre little farm here in Southern Oregon, but we have some established house rules. And that is no talking to each other before 8:30 a.m. So because we realize first thing in the morning, your prana gets wasted just with the social obligation of, how did you sleep? Oh, I slept fine. Oh, I didn't sleep well. And now you already wasted your prana, because in the morning I'm trying to cultivate prana. We're trying to gather our own prana. We walk on the property in the early morning, or we chant our japa meditation, or we sit in meditation. and we do pranayama practices or yoga, but we need to do it in silence. And we can each support each other by doing that in silence. So we realized, oh, wow, we could waste a lot of prana in the morning if we just chit chat with each other unnecessarily. So we have established rule, quiet, no chit chatting before 8:30 a.m. And then 8:30 a.m. we do some practices together. Usually we chant and sing kirtan together, and then now we have a group activity, so it's cohesive. And then we all share about our day, eat breakfast, and then go on with our duties, right? So this is just one example. What does that look like for you in your life? Where are you wasting unnecessarily? And then the next phase is, if I notice where I'm wasting it unnecessarily, well, what can I do to remedy that? What can I do instead? A lot of it, it doesn't only come down to conversation externally, but it's also conversation internally. The mental loops that our brains take us on, our minds take us on, worries incessantly. It's all craziness in the mind, because the mind creates its own problems. The job of the mind is to create problems that you can't solve, but to make them feel urgent, so you're constantly trying to solve them. And then it's crazy making, because it's constantly creating problems to solve that are unsolvable. So it creates these loops. That's just what it does. And it's constantly worrying about things in the future that are all illusions, because they're all what ifs and they didn't happen yet. So you can't possibly respond to them because they're not real. Or things in the past that you regret or should have done differently or whatever. And then it's having fake conversations with people. I should have said this or that. And it's creating a complete drain on our prana. So we must engage our mind with something that's higher and more supportive. And the first thing is, at the very least, some breath practices and meditation that allows us to focus the mind in a way so it's not just running rampant, because the mind is not your master. The mind is loud and obnoxious and has whipped us into thinking it's our master, but it's not our master. So who is the real master? That's for you to explore and find out. And it's not the mind. It's not the voices in your head. So these are the two other things that you might not expect. I know it's a little bit of a reality check, and it's not the most mystical, magical exploration of the pranic body and how to explore our pranic energy and increase, the flow of prana. But it's definitely a very, very practical, real way that people deplete their energy and waste a lot of prana. So don't unnecessarily waste your prana. Checking for questions. Thank you for your honesty, John. John says, I'm wasting my prana internally by complaining internally. Absolutely. We all do. Thank you for recognizing that. Blaine asked if I could spell out the three parts of the mantra breathing exercise. Yes. Ha, Re, Om. So the three syllables are ha, and the first, when you say the phrase ha, you should feel a little contraction in the low belly. Ha, 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 right? So the energy starts down there. And this is actually how it's circulating prana through your body. So ha starts down there, and then Re moves it up the spine. And then Om circulates it from the back of your head to the middle of your head to the front of your head, which also circulates it all the way forward and then brings it back to the starting point of Ha. So Hari Om circulates that whole prana through your body. Great question. It's funny. I'm glad you asked, because it's the one little descriptor at the beginning that I skipped, which I share in every other workshop, but I didn't today because I wanted to talk about it during the content. So thank you for asking. Yep. Okay. And one final, so then we get back to the question, so how do I gather prana or reinforce my prana? Not just circulate it, but how do I actually increase it? So this also has to do with the pillars of health that we talked about in previous months in terms of like optimizing food and digestion. Food is a way that you actually bring good prana into your body because you're bringing the life force of those, ideally plant primary diet into your body, and that's infusing your cells with prana. And then you also increase prana by being out in the country, out in nature, fresh air, and breathing fresh air and looking out at a beautiful lake and seeing nature and hearing nature. These are all things that increase and feed our prana. So there's so much more, to share in that realm, but these are all like very important ways. And I think the most important ways that are missing in today's society, day and age. All right. I see another question. Okay, 2 more questions. Thank you for your engagement. Paul said, early morning familial interaction expectations are an area of difficulty, whereas I prefer my own space rather intuitively. Need to set this boundary in a way that's understood and not lost in conversational confusion. Yeah, absolutely. And that's where we have to get like practical and curious, like what can shift in our environment, or how can I prioritize something that's important to me without controlling another, right? Because oftentimes we feel like if we determine we have a need, and then we immediately think why that need is oppressed, why that need can't be met. And usually it's because of the people in our environment. So then we sometimes switch to like feeling like we need to control others or our environment in order to have a need met. But that's not necessarily the case. So how can we just, right, give ourselves what we need? And then you start to think outside of the box. What are all the ways I can get this need met by changing something that's specific just to me? Or how can I come into like a deeper communion with the people that I share space with so that we find our collective needs and explore what those are? So great reflection. And, I know for me, I also, because I do live in a little bit of a communal environment, and I am an introverted type of person, and my energy gets filled up by being alone for the most part, like alone in nature, just having my own space. So I tend to go to bed early and wake up early, because that's a way that I also, even though we have the no talking, a rule on the property, it's kind of like I still like that spacious alone time. So I'll sometimes wake up really early and go out for a walk in nature, or wake up really early and just sit in the stillness. So great inquiry there, Paul. And then Stephanie asked, oh, hi, Stephanie. Do you feel the morning time is the best to encourage prana? Absolutely. So on that note, it's when prana is the highest in the environment, is before sunrise. Yay, good to see you. Great question. So yeah, prana is the highest, what they call Brahma Muhurta, which is arguably in different traditions, it's defined as different times, but we'll just say all basically the hours between 3 to 6 a.m., 4 to 6 a.m. before sunrise. And the earlier that you can wake up and feel alert before sunrise, the more that prana in your environment is available to you. So that's a great time to fill up. And I notice when I prioritize doing an Ayurvedic routine, like in the evening, and I get really good sleep and I go to sleep early, then I just naturally wake up during that Brahma Muhurta time, which always just really fills me up and fuels prana in that way. And then Nicole asked, any tips for areas where prana flow is blocked or not flowing as it should, especially methods of doing it without activating the mind? An example would be calming pitta going into the summer. not sure the example of calming pitta going into summer or how that's relating to the methods where prana's blocked, but let me just speak to the first part, because so say for example, if prana is blocked, I do a lot of work with women, so I'll just mention this. And I just wrapped up a women's immersion. So we were just talking about this topic in the last few weeks. So an example would be a woman who's experiencing pranic stagnation and that shows up in her menstrual flow, for example. So the flow, instead of being bright red blood, would be dark brown, clotty, and then she'd have cramps or something like that. So that's all showing that prana is stagnant in the womb area. So then there's different things. There's like on the different layers, which we call in yogic science, the 5 koshas, the panchamaya koshas, or the 5 sheaths. So there's like different ways you can access to open areas of stagnation in the body. So you need to look at the physical and the pranic and the energetic. But if we're speaking just to prana, so the reason I bring that up in relation to the womb is like castor oil packs, for an example, are a physical way to break up stagnation, but it also helps work on the pranic level too, because the prana body and the physical body are, the prana body is the interface and the connection point between the physical body and the mental emotional body. So they're very, very closely related. And so anytime we're talking about the pranic body, we can also access it a little bit through the physical body and through the mental emotional body. So if there's a pranic stagnation, there's always something doshically. Maybe that's why you're bringing up pitta there. So there's always something like doshically that you can do. Oh, prana is stagnating because tejas is really high or pitta is really high and inflammation is really high in that area. So everything gets inflamed and then the channels to flow become constricted as a result. So if that's the case, then yes, you definitely want to pacify any excess dosha or reduce the heat in a particular area. And then that will, or increase the cooling effect in that area. And then simultaneously, there's usually right on the other side of prana is on one side the physical, and then on the other side is the mental emotional. So then also just getting in tune with, like, as I hold presence in this area, what are the emotions that come up for me? And then there's like there's a therapeutic process that I do in one-on-one work that kind of marries all of the things we were talking about in Ayurveda with kind of like I guess psychotherapeutic, psycho-emotional kind of therapy. And we do like a reprocessing of memories and things like that. So first it might, for example, come up as a sensation pranically. There's stagnation. And okay, then there's an emotion. Oh, what's the first layer? Emotion. I'm just frustrated that I can't figure this thing out and I just want it to go away. It's so cumbersome in my life and I'm frustrated with it. So it's like, okay, just being with that. And then as I am just with that, what's the next layer that shows up? Oh, there's anger there. There's like a deeper anger. Okay, where was the earliest memory of that anger? Okay, well, that particular anger, and then I get a flash of a memory from childhood where there was a violation or where someone prohibited me from being in my clear expression, in my true expression. So for example, I'm just remembering a recent client experience that we did this reprocessing practice with, and it was every time she cried, she basically got shamed from her father. So there was like this area of stagnation in her body, this mysterious pain that she couldn't, that for years she was trying to figure out what it was. And every doctor's test came back negative constantly, but it was a very real pain. So finally, we worked through some layers over about a year of counseling. And then she had this memory and this reprocessing of every time she went to cry, her father was like, oh, here you go again. You're using your tears to manipulate me, or whatever projection he was making, but he would make her wrong for the tears. So then she learned crying is bad and I need to hold it and I need to be, a certain way. So the more you presence, so after that layer, what happens? Well, I'm angry that I didn't get to be in my authentic expression and that I wasn't around people that could accept me for who I am when I am not. And so, okay, so you're just with that anger. Yes, you have every right to be angry. So just like releasing that anger. And when you hold it a little bit longer in that area of stagnation, what comes up next? So we did the reprocessing cycle again. And then she said, well, I remember now that every time my father and I got in a big fight and I ran to my room, and then he would sometimes come and be very loving towards me. And then I would just be really confused and frustrated. Why did we have to go through all that fighting just for you to be compassionate? Couldn't we just be compassionate? So then there was another layer of frustration, but then on the other side of the layer of frustration, then now there's another layer of compassion. Oh, because now I'm just remembering that tender moment between us, because I finally gave myself the space to be with every layer of emotion that I had been holding in for decades and decades of my life. Then what happened? Okay, then the memories dissolve. And now I'm back to sensation. Now I'm noticing this tingling sensation. Okay, just be with that tingling sensation. Okay, I'm breathing, I'm being with the tingling sensation. Now the tingling sensation, now, wow, this weird pain is kind of poking me. Okay, just be with that pain. And then on the other side of it, okay, now there's tears. Okay, so then we just release the tears. Okay. I don't know why I'm crying, but I'm just crying. Okay, just allow there to be whatever experience you're having. And then on the other side of that, everything was calm. And this was all in the area of stagnation on the left side of the abdomen. And sometimes it'll move, the awareness will move to different parts of the body. And then we're actually following the pranic flow of a particular emotion that may have been traveling or moving or having areas of constriction. But there's a mysterious and organic and natural way that becomes revealed for each person. And it usually looks like going through all the layers. It's not only at the layer of the prana. But to answer your question, and thank you for so beautifully bringing this topic up, Nicole, is that provided, a bigger context example of what does it actually look like if flow is blocked in a certain area. It usually looks like addressing it specific to the area that it's blocked, because from an Ayurvedic perspective, there's something specific to why it had an affinity for that area of the body. And there's certain organs of the body that have an affinity to storing particular emotions. So for example, the liver stores anger and rage, or the lungs store grief, or the womb stores stress, or held back expression, the womb area, whether that's for a man or a woman. And grief could be stored in other areas too. But just brief examples, not to say that any particular organ or tissue of the body not functioning properly means that emotion is stuck there, but just to say that there are certain emotions that have an affinity to certain areas of the body. And then, so we need to look at what is the organ, what is the affinity of that area of the body, what does that organ need, what's happening in the digestion, why is that part of the body not getting fed properly, what does it need, what are the nutrients it needs to come back into balance, how do I reignite the intelligence of that area, and then in a very specific way and in a holistic way. And then it looks like also being in that pranic attunement where breath, attention, energy, love is also brought. I've personally just found that when there's an area in the body that's stagnant, that usually the presence of compassion and curiosity into an area is the most vital thing that's needed to actually help bring flow to that area. So if you're feeling, resentment, frustration, anger towards the area for whatever, those are also valid parts of you that are having emotional experience. And those parts of you need to have compassionate towards be compassionate and have compassion and curiosity for the parts that are frustrated. But if you can have all of those other parts and all those other voices take a back seat for a moment and just bring curiosity and compassion into the area that you're feeling stagnant for whatever reason, or in whatever expression of stagnation, then it allows itself to reveal. And usually then there's some kind of emotional or even mental process of memory or whatever could come up in that area. And it's different for everyone. Sometimes it's an example like I just gave. Sometimes it looks totally different. Sometimes it's only sensation. Sometimes it's also color, or what people think is like a very spiritual experience. But it's related to the pranic body and all those colors and, astral experiences are happening on the level of the pranic body. So that's not necessarily spiritual, but of course, spiritual infuses everything, every layer, but it's just what happens in that area. So sometimes it'll come up symbolically for people, and then sometimes it'll come up in dream time symbolically. So yeah. So if there's awarenesses that are coming up for any of you that you want to explore further, I would just encourage that we talk one-on-one and explore it for you specifically, because I can kind of give general examples of what it could look like, but there's no straightforward, formula button for you to press that I can give in a class format. So my calendar has some openings in the next couple of weeks. So I can give you the link to that via email, or anyone can email me hello@alicialyndiaz.com if you want an appointment. So thank you so much for asking. Got it. Thank you, Nicole. Oriana, or Oriani. I love that name. I want to know how to pronounce it. It's beautiful. So I'll just read it out loud. I struggle with waking when it's still dark and wait till it gets bright to get up. Totally. But I feel I would like to rise earlier, as I don't do the pranayama exercises that would help me. Yeah, it's more just a matter of, I'll tell you my method of waking up earlier. One is definitely going to bed a little earlier. That makes a big difference. But if you're already kind of naturally waking when the sun comes up, you can check the sunrise time of your area because it changes obviously every day. But I have to, when I need to train myself, I use a super quiet, gentle alarm, and then I use a backup alarm. And so the backup alarm is my phone that's plugged in on the other side of the room. That's going to be loud and obnoxious if I don't wake up to the little gentle sound that's right next to my bed that will not repeat itself. So I basically have this little sports watch, this one, and it'll do one tiny little beep, 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 beep. And there's no snooze button, and it's very quiet, but it's enough to wake me up. And if I didn't have a backup, I'd probably just go back to sleep. But if I use that method where I know I have to get out of bed, otherwise the loud, obnoxious thing's going to get me, then I'm like, and I don't want it to wake up my partner, I'll be like, okay, time to wake up. And you can just set it like 20 minutes before the sunrise, like 15 or 20 minutes before. And then you go turn off the loud one, and then you start to wake. And you do that just for a few days. And then you stop setting the alarm because now your body's used to the rhythm. And then you can do it, you do a week where it's just 15 or 20 minutes earlier. And then the following week, you do another 15 or 20 minutes earlier. And the key is to start winding, like let yourself start winding down. If you aim for winding down by like 8:30 or 9, you will for sure catch the wave of melatonin that's naturally released in your blood. And if you're not bombarded by lights and screens into the evening after sunset, then, and you just do mellow things and you let your body catch the wave of melatonin and go to sleep early, you will wake up at 5 a.m. without even thought about it. It's very cool. So, and really just trying to get to sleep by 10 is the goal. But that's what I'm saying. But winding down is that natural melatonin is released in your bloodstream around like 8:30, depending on the time of year. And so we naturally start to feel heavy at that time if we allow ourselves to feel it, if we're not falsely stimulating ourselves. So my recommendation is just allowing yourself to go into that earlier and then using this method of slowly setting the alarm clock a little earlier. But if you're effective at the sleep and going to bed early, then you'll wake up early. And also having something inspiring to do first thing in the morning, like a place to sit, a stable place to sit every morning to do your pranayama. You know, and actually we're going to talk about this next month because we're going to start talking about the spiritual pillar of health and, you know, setting up your sacred space at home to like be an inspiring place that pulls you out of bed and that you want to go sit. And then you anchor in this memory of alertness and prayer and meditation or whatever it is for you on your same seat every morning. And it's a beautiful way to establish that morning practice very regularly. So thank you for asking. Oh, okay, great. You said, I will try this and let you know how it goes. Thanks for acknowledging you know my name. It's pronounced like Oriana. Oh, Oriana. That's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing. And I hope you come next month so we can share more about that, how to effectively add the practices in. Alrighty, so let me come back to my notes. I don't see any other questions at the moment, and we're about to wrap up. The last thing I wanted to share that's a practice for supporting the very subtle circulation of prana is once you become more like you're not wasting prana anymore, you're doing things that are deliberately filling you with life and you're being mindful, you're doing the breathing practices, things are circulating, you're filling up on prana. And you're mindful the way you're moving, you're starting to bring prana into like different areas of your being and circulating it. Now you can start, and you're becoming more sensitive. Now you can start working with the even more subtle pathways and through a practice called mudra. So mudra, I sometimes refer to it, just because it's silly, as yoga for your hands, but it's not just yoga for your hands. But mudras are different hand positions that affect the nadi channels in your body. And so there's dozens and dozens of hand positions that look like all kinds of finger interlocked, you know, different kinds of positions that cultivate energy and move energy in particular ways. And I think I shared a class on several mudras last year, so it's probably on my YouTube channel, but I'll leave you with one that is called Abhaya Mudra. Abhaya Mudra is spelled A-B-H. Let me put it in here. Abhaya Mudra. So Bhaya in Sanskrit means fear, and Abhaya is the negation of Bhaya. So it means the mantra for fearlessness. I'm sorry, mudra for fearlessness. So it's a mudra that helps you release anxiety, worry, and all of that out of the psyche. And so this can be practiced every day right after you do pranayama. you hold Abhaya Mudra. And Abhaya Mudra is the simplest mudra of them all. It's simply you have your right hand, palm facing forward, fingers are kind of relaxed together, almost like a stop sign, but instead of your hand being really rigid, it's kind of like relaxed. And you're tucking your elbow in, shoulders relaxed, and your hand is just pointing forward. And you just hold this position for the duration of your meditation and make sure that your body is just kind of relaxed and open. Your left hand can be resting palm faced up on your lap while you're practicing Abhaya Mudra. And you just breathe deeply and essentially just hold this posture in the most relaxed way that you can. And it affects the prana in your body in such a way that helps you really surrender to the higher divine energies of life that are guiding you. It helps you connect more to the guidance and wisdom in your own heart, in your own soul. And it helps release excess, just tension, worry, stress, fear out of the system. So, like I said, there are many different mudras, but this is such an accessible, beautiful, simple one that doesn't require your fingers to go in a lot of knots. So you just hold this. So that's Abhaya Mudra, and is just the final kind of practice I wanted to offer you for this month. So please continue these breathing practices and mudra practices as best as you can. Keep being gentle. Oh, Lisa, I think I called you Joseph before because I saw I didn't see your face. I'm so glad you received a lot from this class. Thank you so much for being here, Lisa. And yeah, I can't wait to connect with you all next first Wednesday of the month. So next June, I'll send it in the email, whatever day that is. I think it's a June 6th. Don't quote me on that. But the first Wednesday of each month, same time, we have these open community classes. I will email you the recordings. If you're watching this as a recording and you're not on the email list registered for the live classes, to get additional resources and tips and emails and notifications, please sign up on my website. The registration for these community classes is free. So alicialyndiaz.com, and then click on the button that says, I think it says trauma healing, and it's the trauma healing workshop series, but obviously we're talking about so much more than just that. And I just thank all of my teachers and predecessors who've shared this information with me. I would be lost without you, and it's such an honor to share it all with you. Thank you for being willing participants, so engaged in this beautiful topics and this beautiful wisdom of life. And thank you all for your thanks in the chat. I'm very grateful for you all too. So I'll just chant one final closing prayer that's sending out all the love, blessings, and goodness to the world. If you know it, you can chant it with me. It's Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. Om Shanti. Peace, peace, peace. Sending peace and love out to the world. Inhale, take a deep breath in, exhale with Om, and then we'll chant the prayer. Om. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Hari Om Tat set. Love and blessings. See you all soon.